But when you sign any contract, you should read the terms and conditions.
I don't think that jumping out of an aeroplane without a parachute is good advice.
We are just trying to build up fear, because when people are afraid, they are easier to rule.
What we need is a very holistic worldview.
The world has so changed in the United Kingdom now.
We have 3 members of parliament from the Great Britain. We have Rupa Huq, we have Andrew Gwynn, and we have Chris Bryant. Welcome to our British guests. And of course we have 2 winners of the Future Leaders Connect program, first edition in Poland, who are Antonina Lewandowska and Jan Zygmuntowski. This is a global issue, definitely, but what we in our countries, or also in all the kinds of bodies in which our countries are members, what we can do about climate crisis at this moment when we're starting to feel how bad the things are.
The problem is with an issue like climate change is quite often it's seen as peripheral, and it's seen as, I know in the UK it's seen as a bit of a luxury sort of issue, do you know what I mean? Like it's not as fundamental as putting food on the table, that kind of thing, but it's a slightly middle class, student-y type of thing, and I think that's a mistake because it affects, it's intrinsic to everything, it's the future of our planet, and these things are man-made and avoidable. We in the UK have now declared a climate emergency.
In the UK, we've just had our warmest July ever and our wettest August in record. Our climate is changing, and it's changing because of the things that we as human beings across the world have done and are continuing to do. And so as politicians and as leaders, we've got a duty to ensure that our environment is protected for the future. We've got to ensure that our planet is one that we would want to hand on to future generations, a sustainable planet. And for those of us in the developed parts of the world, we've got a duty to help those parts of the world that are still developing to do so in a very sustainable way. The leadership that countries can take, like Britain, like Poland, like the European Union, on a global stage to get countries to work together to tackle the climate emergency that will imperil us all if we don't deal with this across nation, across the globe, is so important. And we've really got to put pressure on those countries that don't believe that climate change is a real thing, and in particular President Trump and the United States of America. It is not sustainable for America to walk away from the Paris Climate Accords. We need to get them back round the table, and we need to make sure that we work together as a global community.
We've got to make sure that we win the argument, because there are too many politicians around the world, in particular trying to appeal to a populist argument, who are trying to say that climate change has nothing to do with how we've been using our natural resources. I seem to recall at one point there was somebody who was even arguing that the tornadoes that the United States of America was suffering was all because of the gays. My constituency in Wales used to be a mining constituency. 100 years ago, everybody in my constituency worked in the coal mines, and now nobody works in the coal mines. So we've had to adapt enormously locally. If the single biggest sort of populist row that is out there in many different countries is about immigration, actually people don't come to the United Kingdom for the benefit system or anything like that. They come to the UK because we speak English, because we have or at least up until now, we've had a good criminal justice system, you're safe and things like that, and we've had a strong economy. Those are the reasons people come. But the biggest driver in the future is likely to be environmental degradation. That is an argument that we need to make more and more about. If you really want to make sure that people can stay in their homes elsewhere in the world, we have to be able to tackle man-made climate change.
And I know that we cannot create a social change without working with the grassroots. So what should happen is including the experts, the NGOs, and other activists who've been working with climate change and what's currently happening to the works of the politicians, because without creating an inclusive politics, we're all going to lose. So we should focus, maybe you as politicians, you can introduce an idea of creating like climate education at schools. But let's stop running around like children and screaming that we're all going to die in 50 years, because yes, that's going to happen if we don't sit down and just talk like grown-ups about what we can do. Poland is running out of clean water, drinking water. We may not have it in the next 20 years. So what are we going to do? And if Europe is going to react locally, like we do with refugee crisis, every single country should declare how many people are they going to take in. So maybe we should split water. Maybe that's one of the solutions. I don't know, I'm not an environmentalist. So we have to count on ourselves, and we have to focus on working at the grassroots and creating solutions on not only international and global levels, but also regional and local.
More renewable energy is great, and very often this is the participatory approach. We want local communities to be more self-sustainable, to rely on photovoltaics, on the wind power, but also to maintain any kind of strong, robust industry, we still need some strong baseload.
We need more efficient, more energy system. We have less consuming energy and so on the side of the business, corporations, governments and so on. What do you think about that?
I think that it's quite a capitalist thing to do, to blame people for what's currently happening, because the main players to blame are actually capitalist corporations and the biggest firms and international businesses, let's say, because they are the ones who create on a massive scale.
I don't think that they will do it out of themselves. It's not self-regulation, because if a part of their budget, a part of their business model is externalities, putting some piece of trash outside, never accounting the costs. If they drag the costs in, probably they will lose margin.
Now we'll switch to another very, very important subject for both of our nations and countries, which is Brexit. If or when Brexit happens, so what could we do, or could you do as leaders from both nations or future leaders to maintain good relations, or very good relation we've had for the last 30 years between Great Britain and Poland?
When Brexit happens, and we have to be prepared that it happens, I hope that we can focus on a development that is that will show how to also reform the EU, not how to even further, go away from strong regulatory frameworks and from working on sustainability.
There is a question of unemployment also, because how are these people, like millions of people coming back home in 1 year, how are they going to find a job? Especially that raises the matter of racism. When so many Ukrainians came to Poland to take some of the market because they need the work, and what's currently happening in Ukraine is outrageous. So here, this is a safe spot for them, and they can earn more, so they can support their families at home. But if Poles come back, then we may wonder what is going to happen, because it's very easy to say they are stealing our jobs and the racism will spike.
What we were promised in the referendum, we were promised if we leave the European Union, we would be part of a free trade area from the Russian border to the Atlantic, from Iceland to Turkey. That's the European Economic Area. You speak to people now who advocate Brexit, they deny that. We were promised that there would be a deal, that we would leave with a deal, and this deal would take as long as necessary to get. It was a careful move, not a sudden stop. We are now facing a sudden stop. So all those promises that were made by vote leave in the referendum are now being torn up, and I really worry that we are heading to the United Kingdom crashing out of the European Union without a deal. Now that sounds fine, it's all populist, and it's, two fingers up to the Europeans, and we're British, we can do this. But bluster doesn't put food on your table. Bluster doesn't keep people in jobs. And the fact is, for the past 45 years, we have been part of a family of nations. We are now closely integrated economically with the European Union. And if we are to leave, we need to leave with a good deal that maintains trading links, that maintains cooperation on things like crime and international terrorism, on the environment. We still need to work together because we are still Europeans, whether we are in the European Union or not. And so I just really fear for my country, because I don't think that jumping out of an aeroplane without a parachute is good advice. And that is what Boris Johnson, it seems to me, is now advocating, that on the 31st of October, if we don't have a deal, then we will jump out of that aeroplane at 30,000 feet without a parachute, and who knows where we're going to land.
I still very much hope that we will have the cooperation on security issues, which I think is absolutely essential. We British people have used the European arrest warrant more than any other country in Europe, both to bring people back to face justice in the UK and the other way round. If we leave in particular without a deal, we will not be part of the European arrest warrant, and even if we leave with a deal, we won't be part of the European arrest warrant. We'll have to invent something better than relying on the 1954 extradition agreements, which used to take 2.5 years to get people back to face justice. Otherwise, I think we become a lawless country.
2015, I was elected for the first time. In the Labour Party, we set a lot of store of knocking on doors. I shall be doing that at 11 o'clock on Saturday. That is my life now. Knocking on doors, seeing what people want. It was never an issue in 2015. Nobody said, I'm worried about European bureaucracy and distant laws taking over my life. It was a manufactured problem by the Conservative Party because of the European election, where the UKIP party did very well. They've been completely taken over, the Conservatives, by UKIP. A degree of entryism, that they've been hijacked by these extreme right UKIP type people. And we were so ill-informed at that time. And I'm often accused of being a patronising southern Londoner, saying people didn't know what they were voting for. But when you sign any contract, you should read the terms and conditions. When you are deleting a file from the computer, it says, are you sure you want to do this? You know, when you buy a house in the UK, you have a survey. It's subject to survey. If the thing's falling down, you don't have to do it at the end. I think there are really strong arguments for a people's vote. But Boris Johnson, who, as I say, he will do anything, say anything to get into power. He apparently wrote 2 articles. For years, his Telegraph columns on a Monday has been his outpourings. He had for and against, and tossed the coin, saw that's what the Conservative leadership wants. They want out. For me to be leader, I have to argue out. You know, we don't have to do this. All we're talking about now is damage limitation from a very bad decision. How do we know if the will of the people in 2019, which was their other big phrase, will of the people and sovereignty of Parliament, is still what the will of the people was in 2016? As every day goes past, that mandate is getting incredibly dated.
Another subject we're going to touch in our panel is the rise of intolerance. We live in the world when all these issues start to sort of get back. After many years, we thought that the situation is getting better. Actually, you can argue that during the last 10 years in Europe or in the US, situation on these issues got worse, and the question is what responsible leaders of now or tomorrow can do actually about it here and now, because it's happening here and now.
I'd say that we have 2 root causes for what's currently happening, which is the feeling of insecurity and the polarization of worldviews. The feeling of insecurity could be caused by the current political situation, the climate change that we have already talked about, what is happening geopolitically, like Brexit. We have to ask ourselves, why do the general public vote for such parties and such people? Firstly, it's the feeling of insecurity that I have just brought up, because people don't know what's going to happen. They're afraid of refugees, because especially in Poland, the narration around refugee crisis is based on, and that's an actual quote, the fact that refugees carry parasites. It's basically a mechanism that has been used even in in Germany just before the Second World War. We are just trying to build up fear, because when people are afraid, they are easier to rule. So the feeling of insecurity may project itself in phobias, in sexism and racism, because the other side that is socially created, there are no other sides. But if we say it's us versus them, then these them become a danger. What a responsible leader should do is show that there is no us versus them, that it's only us, that we are a group of people who share many interests, who, I don't know, like broccoli or going to the movies. Like, we have personalities and we are all people. In my case, as a person who works with the right to free abortion, the right to sexuality education at schools, I've been threatened with death for my work. I've been threatened with a knife on the streets because I work with kids at schools. I've been called a whore and several other not really pleasant words. And people attack me because I go to school and talk to kids about consent. And I get so many questions about how period works. And people apparently think that I am destroying Polish culture because I talk to kids about periods. And it's outrageous and I think hilarious on some level, except from the fact that it's really sad. So what leaders should also do is build up a very strong position that yes, you have the right to your own opinion, but you cannot force it on other people, period. Just like that.
When people actually meet certain people and then they see that it's not LGBT ideology, but people with their lives, their neighbors, their families, then it becomes completely different.
That's what I mean. Dismantle the entire us versus them by creating some bridges of like, this is our part of the understanding, it existed in our history by our local heroes. When you build these bridges, there is no us and them.
But I don't really think that we need those bridges because they are already there. The LGBT community is out there. We live together. And ethnic minorities are already out there, and we're living together. The bridges are there. We just have to use them and show them to people. You know so many gay people or bisexual people. You may know somehow that's transgender, and you just simply don't know it because they're afraid to come out.
Well, I'm slightly homosexual. Well, in fact, I'm completely homosexual. I just wanted to break it to you gently, in case my tie hadn't told you. I'm 57, and when I was born, it was a criminal offence for two men to have sex in the United Kingdom. When I grew up, I always presumed that as a gay man I would be lonely in my old age, because that's what everybody always told you. When I was first elected in 2001 as an MP, it was still a criminal offence in the United Kingdom for a man to meet another man in a bar and go home together. That was a criminal offence, and people were still being arrested for it. They used other reasons, but that often the offence that they were charged with was the Vagrancy Act of 1824. And the world has so changed in the United Kingdom now. I think that it's an unstoppable force, but I think it's another reason why we need an international element to all of this. And I hate this concept of a tolerant society. I don't want to be tolerated. I hate that. That's like putting up with somebody being naughty in the corner. I want a respectful society. That's what I want.
It was perfectly acceptable to discriminate if you were of a different colour, spoke with an Irish accent, or you were gay.
And those were legal signs. No dogs, no blacks, no Irish. It's just unimaginable now.
None of those things are acceptable, and there are legal protections now to prevent that from happening.
What kind of leaders we need, let's say, not for a century, but let's say for the next 15 years, which is probably an amount of time which we can sort of try to imagine ourselves.
Where politics, global politics is at the moment, is we've almost got the reverse of that. It's that the world's a big bad place and I'll look after my own interests, and inequality is something that really can't be fixed. You can tinker around at the edges, but you know, it's what I can get out of it and what my country can get out of it. It's very individualistic, and that's got us into a mess. So I want the leaders of the future to have a global outlook, but one of hope and of positivity and of change for the better, because if politics and leadership is to do anything, it's to improve the world. You know, we all join our respective, well, the same political parties because we wanted to change the world. Wherever you live on this planet, we're all human beings. We all breathe the same air. We all stand on the same soil. We might be in different parts of the world, but we come into the world the same way and we go out the same way. It's what we do and what we leave behind that matters.
I think what we need is a very holistic worldview. So no externalities. This waste is gonna come after you at some point. Do not accept inequalities, because if you have inequalities in a society, this society gets fractured and there's people who will always end up, you know, in a very unhealthy environment, and that will drag on the future generations, and in 50 years you will have a serious problem that is not so easy to fix. We are all connected and we cannot leave anyone behind, because it's gonna come back at us at some point. It is really important to do our homework. I mean, work on the personal development, to build empathy skills.
I would like to see future leaders that aren't just a replication of the ones that went before. I think we need a more diverse bunch of people. So we have in the UK another Prime Minister who's been to Eton School and Oxford University. These two places seem to churn out leaders all the time. I think in France it's the École Nationale d'Administration. And the standard type of MP, Member of Parliament, was someone who, you know, grey-haired man in a grey suit, so that our leadership reflects our nation. They're not just the cadre of top people, the elites who are selected to lead us.
So we need to work on every level, grassroots level, regional level and international level, and those levels have to cooperate. We need to talk to the people that are actually on the ground and who are trying to somehow solve these issues. We need to work with activists, we need to work with people affected by current situations, because they already live in these conditions, in these situations, and they may have solutions. Politics is not about individuals anymore. We need individuals to lead, but they have to be supported by a very strong base, counseling groups.
You need, I think, to have a thin enough skin to be able to hear what's going on in the world around you, but thick enough skin to be able to survive the attacks. You do have to ride your personal, the things that passionately got you involved in politics about changing the world and so on, whether from the right or the left, actually. And you've got to do that, but you've also got to be able to make compromises and listen to the populist arguments that are going on around. And that's terribly difficult, because sometimes you feel you've betrayed yourself. But the single thing that I think matters more than anything else is a degree of authenticity about yourself. That it's the thing every person in the public can smell through the television, whether you're authentic.
So I just noted a few words: optimism, hope, personal development, honesty, need to reach out, values, performance, ability to build coalition. Let us hope to have this kind of leaders in the future, not this kind of leaders we most of the time have now. Thank you very much for that discussion. Thank you. Give a clap to the wonderful panel.